This is iFanboy Pick of the Week, number 919, brought to you by iFanboy listeners like you. My name's Josh Flanagan. Sitting in for my co-host, Connor Kilpatrick, is Dr. Ryan Haupt.
Hit me, baby, one more time. That's what I call color commentary. I'm here for the color. Josh is here to keep us on the rails.
Hey-o, if you're going to start doing that, then you have to let me know so I can set up a soundboard situation.
Haupt take.
Haupt take? That has to have existed previously. That's
yeah,
not...
you said it should be on the soundboard, and I included it at the stinger at the end of the episode that it was first introduced in, and I saved it as a separate sound file if I ever need to drop it in again. If I ever have another Haupt take, I can drop it in.
So you're telling me that I came up with that, and
yes.
I said, that's really good. And then
then you just did it again. I just went down the same neural pathways we went down before.
I do that if I listen to these shows, which I don't do all that frequently, like later, not when I edit it. I think of the same joke in my head often before I hear myself say it. Like if I don't remember.
Same. I think like, why haven't I butted in to say this yet? And then I'll butt in and say that. The worst is when I can hear that I'm getting a frog in my throat and I'm like, oh my God, Ryan, clear your throat. And then like I have to like clear my throat in real life and hopefully on the mic to get it out of my brain.
That's fun. This is the iFanboy Pick of the Week, number 919, 919. That number has no significance. I was trying to think of something.
It's palindromic.
It is. There is something about it that I like. There's nines. There's three digits.
It's the devil's number
divisible.
Upside down.
No, it's not.
Well, there's
it's Marvel upside down.
There is an interpretation. It is Marvel's universe upside down. There is another translation of the Mark of the Beast where it is 616, not 666, but.
Every week, one of us picks the book they like the best from their stack of comics. We tend to keep the ecclesiastical and is it liturgical? Is that the correct word?
Apocryphal?
No, that's definitely not the word. I was trying so hard to think of the word indignant earlier today, and I could not do it. They picked the book they liked from their stack of comics. We call that the pick of the week. We will talk about that pick. That book. We will talk about other comics that came out this week. We will talk about the Patron Pick, which is a pick of somebody else that they made, a group of people. Will there be listener mail? Maybe. It should be a good, fun time. There will be spoilers for those books, so if you're not into that, you have been warned. Ryan, you had the pick.
I did have the pick, and the first book I read on my stack. I must admit, I surprised myself by having the reaction I did to this book, but it ended up as the pick, which folks already know because they can see the title of the episode, is Fables number 162, part 12 of 12 of the Black Forest. So this is the return of the complete original Fables team. It's Bill Willingham writing, Mark Buckingham on pencils, Steve Leahola on inks, Lee Loughridge colors, and Todd Klein letters. So an all-star team from, maybe a slightly prior era of comics returning to a series that was both much beloved, much maligned, maybe not much maligned, but had its moments of controversy. And they've done this 12-issue arc. And this final issue felt very much like the final episode in a season of Game of Thrones where like most of the action happens in the penultimate episode. But then the final episode is sort of the epilogue for all the various story arcs that came about that season. You follow me?
I do.
And that's sort of what this was. So, there's sort of a climactic moment at the beginning of the issue. And then the rest of the issue is sort of picking up the pieces, everyone sort of settling back into what their lives are going to become. If you haven't been reading this the whole time, I don't think me going over any of the story beats is going to be that meaningful. And I assume, Josh, you've not been reading this? Okay.
No.
It tied up. I wouldn't even say it tied up loose ends because sort of the point of Fables as an overarching theme of the book and the point of this issue in particular. I'll just say sort of all issues of Fables have like a little like blurb of like herein we learned that blah 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 blah. So the one for this book, this issue is in which we conclude the story of the Black Forest, knowing that stories never really end. And I just thought it was a really nicely done ending to this series that, for folks who don't know, Fables is a book about I guess I probably do need to give a little background on Fables because like people might not know. Fables was a book from the peak Vertigo times where it's a bunch of public domain fairy tale characters like Snow White, Big Bad Wolf, Old King Cole, Little Boy Blue, Pinocchio, etc., Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Belle and the Beast, and they're all living together in this block in Manhattan, having escaped into the quote unquote mundane world from their fantastical realms that have been invaded by this unknown, it's just called the Adversary.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposed to go for 75 issues. And it went for 75 issues and was really strong that whole way through. And then Bill and the team decided to keep it going. And there were a ton of spinoffs, and some of them were really good. But I think the story lost its way a little bit. And full disclosure, not that we're journalists, but like I'm friends with Bill. I have spent a lot of time with him. And I know for a fact, and he said this in interviews, I don't think this is a secret, that the Adversary was always intended to be Peter Pan. So he had always planned that Peter Pan was the ultimate big bad guy for Fables. But there's this weird quirk with copyright law, similar to Steamboat Willie that we've probably been seeing, people have been seeing in the news. There's this weird quirk with Peter Pan where Peter Pan was public domain in the US, but not public domain in the UK. And Vertigo sales, the trade sales were important in the international market, so Vertigo wouldn't let Bill use Peter Pan or caution him against it because they would not be able to sell the book in the UK because of this weird rights issue where J.M. Barrie, the original author of Peter Pan, had given the rights to this character to the London Children's Hospital, so the London Children's Hospital could make money off the proceeds of Peter Pan's stuff to help take care of kids. It's a good thing. It wasn't just corporate greed. But it meant that Parliament had extended the copyright beyond when they normally would. So now Peter Pan is fully public domain. So you've been seeing a lot of movies and other properties come out. So I think what this 12-issue arc represented was sort of, I think, I haven't actually talked to Bill about this, but I think this was Bill getting to sort of tell that part of the story that he was sort of stopped from telling when he was in the thick of it full swing. And I just thought that was a really cool moment. It was a really interesting way to return to this tale that he maybe didn't get to do exactly how he wanted, maybe put some of those pieces back in play in the way that he'd always originally intended, and then just sort of give all the characters their goodbye. And it was a satisfying ending.
This is the end?
I think so. I mean, it says the end at the,
and then there's no
final panel.
There's no next, to be continued. There's do we know if there's another issue solicited? What number is this? This is
162.
162.
Yeah.
Keep talking while I do this.
But it's a 12-issue arc, so this is a complete maxi series, and it ends in sort of a way that's consistent with the ending we got from the original series, which sort of ends on a note about the legacy of the Big Bad Wolf and Snow White, which if you've read the series, they become a couple, they have kids, and so their kids go off into the world and have all these various and varied adventures and become sort of gods of mythical worlds in their own rights. The Big Bad Wolf is essentially a god in the world of Fables. And yeah, it says the end at the end. So I have to believe
I don't
that
see,
this is it.
I don't see 163 solicited or anything like that. So I guess that'll be the end of it. Yeah. Yeah, because it says Fables series originally published in single. This is on Goodreads, form by Fables number 1 to 162 by DC. I like it as if it's over.
And I was impressed that this same creative team could return and do as good a story as they've done previous as sort of this 12-issue arc. And there were stakes, there were consequences. It again gets back to that sort of Game of Thrones thing where characters are making decisions. Those decisions have consequences. Those consequences are sometimes dire, if not downright tragic. And to me, that's the mark of a good story. It's that Brian K. Vaughan thing of kill your darlings. And I would say this is a really strong week of comics. I liked a lot of books. There were several books that easily could have been picked. And there were so many good books that could have been picked. Not even all of them are in the rundown of this week's episode. Mm-hmm. But this was the one that emotionally sort of just hit me the hardest where I live, reminded me of the time when I was first getting back into comics in a serious way in that early 2000s peak Vertigo era. And I just couldn't kind of stop thinking about maybe less so the story beats and just what it made me feel about all the characters that I'd come to know over the time I've spent reading this book. And so it was the best book I read this week.
That is, and was this team doing all the issues of this arc?
Yeah.
Really? Because it is my understanding that Buckingham has had a harder time with that recently, and so to have them sort of go all the way through, that's pretty amazing. And
it's got the great like Buckingham side panels where like the side gutters of each page is like.
Did they abandon that? I figured the new artist.
No, I don't think they have. But it's just like, to me, it's almost reminiscent of a bygone era of comics to have like this extra little flourish that like tells you which character arc you're following based on something completely outside the panel borders of the story beats themselves. Like, to me, that's just such a interesting touch that no one does. If they ever did, no one does it anymore. And
right.
But Bucky's still got it.
That's very cool. I'm glad that's. I mean, the book meant a lot to me for a long time, and when it ended, it was 75, I think. You know, it's weird that they've gone more issues than they had before the first time that they sort of ended it. You know, I sort of came back in and I thought it really ended well for me, and I wasn't getting the sort of same thing out of it. So, I mean, it's kind of amazing that it has gone on for was it being published? It's just DC, I guess, because there is no Vertigo.
Right.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's listed as a Black Label book, so I guess DC Black Label is just the new Vertigo. I don't know.
Is it in the Black Label format? What
does that mean?
It's like more square, like magazine size.
I mean, I'm reading it digitally, so I don't.
Right. So, well, you'd know it because it would. You'd tell. Like, it just looks like a standard comic book page. I'm guessing is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. So there, was that a tough pick, or was that like, yeah, this is totally it? I mean, it sounds like it's like a really emotional sort of like.
It was it was the first book I read this week. It was in partly because it's that whole weird to Wednesday thing where like the DC books come out first, so I didn't have any of my Marvel books to read yet. But it was I knew this was the end of the story, and so I was legitimately excited. And so, the first two books I read were Fables and Action Comics, and they were both really, really good. And I was like, holy crap, I don't know that any other book I'm going to read this week is going to be better than either of those two. Do I have to like figure out my pick from there, which is rare for me. I typically am a person who like, and you've experienced this and even complained about it, where like, I'll have 2 or 3 books left, and I'll be telling you and Connor like, well, hang on, let me finish, because any one of these could be pick. And this week it was like, I was reading through my books. I was enjoying a lot of them, but I was like, I don't think any of them quite make it to the level that it's going to unseat my initial gut response to this one issue.
I like how you were like, well, I'm the kind of person who, when I was like, well, there's maybe like 6 people total who ever have to do this particular thing for the show. I believe you put Alien Black, White, and Red, and did it again. Alien Black, White, and Blood #2 on the list. This first issue was my pick of the week. What are your thoughts?
Holy shit, this is good.
Isn't it great?
This is so good. Especially, I mean, the short format one shots that end each issue are awesome, but this Utopia story arc has me hooked. It's so good. I made a joke in the script for the next couple of books we're going to talk about. It's fascism corner. Everyone, it's just fascism all day. So yeah, like I maybe wouldn't have read the first issue of Alien Black, White, and Blood if it hadn't been your pick of the week. But as soon as I started reading about like this utopian socialist colony ship, I was like, oh, what a great way to set up a society, an organizational structure that is completely unprepared for the threat that the xenomorphs represent. Because I think so often, you very succinctly in that episode sort of spelled out the alien formula of like, it's man's hubris, and then it's man's hubris with the ultimate predator taking us down because we were hubristic in the first place. And typically, I feel like the alien books lean into that hubris being because of capitalism and greed, right? And so to say, no, actually the hubris can be because of a lack of capitalism and a lack of greed can also lead to
ignorant idealism.
Hubris. Yeah, ideology. Any ideology clung too strongly to.
Right.
I've often said this in other contexts in my life, but like really ideological rigidity is the problem. Like, you just can't be so rigid. Yeah, fundamentalism. Like, if flexibility is the key to survival, and I see that in biology, and I see that in political systems, and I see that, I see that in a lot of aspects of life. Like, flexibility, if you are flexible, if you are adaptability, if you can evolve, you can survive. If you can't evolve, you die. And
I gotta say, this first story, which is a continuation of the last Utopia part 2-part story. I mean, I don't actually know. There's another part, although it ends like you could go from here almost.
But you said that about the last one.
I mean, it's true though. There's a very solid ending. I mean, it's a very nice short story. And those are the things that almost tend to impress me more than anything in comics, is to like hit you, beat, twist, ending. You know, like it's really a skill to be able to do in a short amount of time. Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, who have shown an ability to do that, you know, to work in many formats and many. But what happens here is this book takes a massive left turn,
right turn, really. If we're gonna.
Yeah, that's true.
It's fascism corner, Josh.
Over the course of one, that's excellent, by the way. You know, basically one page, they pass a lot of time, and a lot happens in between that page turn, and you understand what it is exactly. They don't need to explain it to you.
It goes straight from like the "What's your plan to save everything?" to "Dear leader."
He's a despot. And I thought that was brilliant. The other thing that I thought it did really, really well was much more than the first issue was, I knew through the way that they told this story exactly what the layout of this like world ship thing they were on is. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. I always think of so when I watched The Two Towers, the Lord of the Rings movie, one of the things that really impressed me most about the latter half of that movie was that you actually saw and understood how the battle commenced and the different phases of it and the tactics and the strategy, and you went through and you saw the narrative of the battle. And that actually doesn't happen a lot in war movies or whatever. It's always sort of you're on the ground and you don't see the whole thing. And with this, we got sort of a complete view of what this losing battle against the aliens was about, and also sort of the shape of this little world that they were living in. And sort of Michael Dowling, I don't know how much was script and how much was drawing, but just in a series of a double page spread in a series of, 4 panels out of the 8, told an entire story. I mean, this was a lesson in economy, this story, and just like effective storytelling economy.
It was a great blend of action, it did the thing that the best Star Wars movies do, where like there's an action moment and then there's the control room where you're seeing the graphic get updated with what the action means, right? And
you can look at the postures of the people.
Oh, it's
and
great.
See how it's going. I'm looking at the pages, and you don't need to read them. It really, I mean, and at the end of the day, we like words and we like scripts, but when you can look at a comic book page, no matter if there are words on it or not, and tell what is happening, that's the thing. And in this whole story, the aliens they're just onrushing. If you look on every page, they're just coming at you. That is the whole thing about them. Right. They don't stop. And as you watch, as they sort of take part by part, and then you've got, so the one kind of idealism was the utopians. And then the second kind of idealism is I don't lose battles. And so he can't look in the face of that battle and see that he never had a chance. He was never winning. So that was a great story. Great second part of it. It is to be continued. And again, this is also in its own. So each story's got its little 3-act structure, but it's part of a larger 3-act structure. And that just gets my bones a chilling.
I also loved the breakdown of the different districts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like I wasn't familiar with the term rayon, but apparently so it's apparently a subnational entity from the French rayon, meaning honeycomb or department. It's commonly translated in English as a district. But so you have the Rayon Magellan, water storage and aquaponics. Magellan was a sailor. Mm-hmm. Rayon Gagarin, first cosmonaut, first human in space, cosmonaut in the Soviet Union, industrial fabrication machinery. Rayon Bianque, apparently he was a Eastern Han Dynasty divine healer who invented acupuncture. So that's like education and medical. Rayon Comrade, housing and community. Rayon Dhaka, oxygen production and recreation. Adaka is a second home in the excerpts of post-Soviet countries. So like all those little details just built the world out. And I had to look stuff up. Like I didn't just know that. I was
so they were Soviets. So they had this like sort of socialist commune, like a utopia plan, and they were like everything is a little Soviet.
Yep.
Not everything. That's really interesting. I mean, this if you just by talking about it, like how much they packed into this, it's
incredible.
It's quite a feat, and it's still sticking with the alien concept. But like, it's not too much. It's a lot, but you don't necessarily need all of it. Moving on to the other stories real quick. We had a short story here from Paul Jenkins. Paul Jenkins, I'm going to describe his career around here as hit or miss. But he does have hits, and he's written some comics that I very much didn't like. But every once in a while, like you remember, like, oh, here's this guy's talent, and this weird little story using the metaphor of being a donut. As there's some settlers on some farm on some planet somewhere, and then they're talking about the animals, and I was like, oh, that's not good. And the beginning, a lady's like, she's trying to enjoy her food, and she's trying to imagine herself in a Zen sense as being the donut. I am a donut. And it's just this weird little thing at the end. And then, everybody gets killed, and then she finds herself about to be eaten, and she realizes, I am a donut. End of story. She doesn't get eaten. We don't see it happen. I'm going back to the credits here so I can give credit where due. Actually, I could just look at the script that you have me because I'm looking at the book. What an idiot. Stephanie Williams, an excellent writer with art by Jethro Morales. Again, this cool, short little story about, military doctrine and when the Marines need to get something done, Space Marines. This is not mission objective. What's this, 5 pages?
Yeah, it's short.
Wow, that's efficient. And we have the situation, we have the conflict, and we have the comeuppance in 5 pages. Beautiful art, really great. I always like I don't want it in everything, but the sort of tree of alien impregnated humans as they are in pain, it hurts, and then the queen comes out, and it's like, oh, it's not good. Wow, that is an impressive 5 pages.
Great issue.
All right, we got 2 great comics so far that we've been through. All right, so can we keep this going?
I think we can. I think with Avengers Twilight Book 4, story by Chip Zdarsky, art by Daniel Acuna, and letters by Joey C., we finally get to see what becometh of Galactathor. And I was really excited coming into this issue because I thought the ending of issue 3 with the return of Thor was such an exciting moment. And I think something I appreciate about this issue is that I don't think Chip tried to reinvent the wheel with his portrayal of Thor here. Like, I think that most of these other versions of the Avengers, they've all been through some shit and are different people because of it. Whereas when this H-Day event that killed all the heroes happened, Thor just said, I need a break, and pieced out until basically this moment, but hasn't really aged, and sort of just says, yeah, I'm immortal. Like, not really a lot of time has passed for me, but I'm sorry I missed out on helping you all. And they're all just kind of like, you're good, buddy. You're back on the team. Let's get it. And I thought that reintegration of Thor into the team was handled really nicely. I liked that Tony Stark is, the awoken jar in the head. The Red Skull has revealed himself to Tony's kid. And I wish I was sort of contrasting this book as I was reading it with Fables, in that like Fables really got time to breathe by doing a 12-issue arc, whereas this, I feel like we're rushing a little bit headlong into things where if we had a full 12 issues, I think there'd be a little bit more to say about stuff. Yeah.
I think that's something that Connor would say as well. I believe it's very possible that by keeping this moving, by keeping this full of action, again, as you go page from page, other than sort of in the aftermath when people are pretty stable, like when things are happening, there's motion all over the place and action. And I kind of like it because it assumes that if you're reading this, you know these characters and you know how they'd react. And you can have some little character moments here and there, but for the most part, it's the Avengers. Some shit has happened. It's the future. They take Tony and they put him in a robot body immediately. By the way, I was so glad that his head woke up in the jar. That made me. That's exactly what I wanted it to be. You don't have to think about anything too much. They're not explaining, like we don't have enough power, and Thor's like, I got you. He zaps the head. Tony wakes up. We get the explanation of who the Red Skull is. What's it, Steve Jarvis? Whatever.
Jarvis's brother. Yeah.
Jarvis's brother. I forget what it is. And there's this really cool. What does he rub on himself?
Just paint.
I don't know. I guess it's paint, but basically he smears red on his face, and before that he looked like Uncle Baby Billy from the Righteous Gemstones. But now he's the Red Skull. There's a line in here where he says like, "You're not Tony Stark's son, you're my son," and I was like, wait, did he mean it real? And I missed something, but I think it's symbolic.
I think so too.
I like that James is right now. He feels irredeemable. Like he's just a piece awful. Of shit.
Yeah,
and I think that's playing with our expectations too. He's be like, well, he's the son of a hero. He will turn into a hero once he finds out the
son
truth.
Of two heroes, a hero and a heroine.
Yeah. And I just like it moves super fast. I thought, again, we are blessed, I believe, for Daniel Acuna's art in this. Apparently, this is what he has been working on for a long time, and to me, it shows. It's all the art. He's doing everything you see on the page, other than the letters. And
that's great. I've always thought it was funny that Thor's lightning, maybe it's the magical properties of it, just equates to like completely compatible power source for whatever needs to be powered. I've always thought that was a little ridiculous because my house was struck by lightning when I was a teenager, and I can tell you it did not super boost our house to unforeseen power levels that we've never experienced before. It just wrecked a bunch of stuff.
It's a great device for fiction, though, and
our dog never recovered emotionally. Right. I also love one of the things I've never seen in a future Marvel story is the idea that as Luke Cage's muscles age, but his skin remains as durable as it always has been, that he would functionally lose the ability he would become immobile. That to me is like such a tragic ending for that character, for that hero. And I never thought about that as a consequence of what his powers would eventually become as his body aged. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So it's one of my favorite. It's interesting because I was looking at him I think I was just trying to figure out, because it almost looks like he's covered in tattoos, but that's not it.
No, it's almost like scales. His skin is becoming craggly.
But it's craggly, but it's unbreakable. So that's kind of interesting. It's lost its
well, I wonder. I mean, it's because like if his muscles are smaller than they have been in the past, and his skin is like contracting, it could be sort of how like when you have really wet dirt, and then as the moisture evaporates, you get these like mud cracks. Because I don't know.
Does that mean that he would have to stay jacked his entire life, though? That doesn't.
I feel like if he was able to rebuild the muscle mass, I feel like he'd maybe be able to move a little bit better. But I don't know.
But his only power isn't unbreakable skin, because he has higher than normal strength. He has superhuman strength, I believe. I could be wrong about that, though.
What's the power ranking on that?
No, I don't know. Look at the old book. No, I mean, yeah, this book continues to be a delight. It's got a lot of the energy and feel in it that Tom King's not Injustice, but the one that came after it.
His strength is a 4 on the scale.
Oh, well, that's still a 4 is more than human. I think like Steve Rogers is like a 2 or 3 or something like that. Peter Parker's like a 6 or 8. I can't believe I remember these. I know, but like I can't remember all sorts of things, like the name of that Tom King miniseries. But which went on for a long time, which I loved, but I can remember the rankings and they'd be like, oh, you can lift the equivalent of 8 tons. Like, it's like, it stuck with me so much.
I always remember being frustrated that I felt like Hank McCoy Beast was listed too low on the strength scale. Like he's only like a 2 or a 3. And I'm like, he's Beast. He should be stronger than that. I know he's not like Spider-Man level strong, but come on, he's the Beast.
All right, so next up we have new Rick Remender with Bengal book, Napalm Lullaby #1. Rick is in one of these ultra creative modes. He started his publisher, his imprint with Image, Giant Generator, and it feels like one book after another for a while. Here's my problem right now: as I'm starting to talk about it, I have to look through it because I don't remember what it was.
Well, so this was really interesting because it starts.
I did not like it, but I don't remember what it was.
It starts with a sort of Superman origin story where these people are protesting,
right?
And a husband and wife get in their truck after a good day's protesting, and then you realize that like he's not super explicit, but he's coding them to be some sort of protesters that more progressive people might not be in line with, in the way that that we all love the Kents, mm-hmm. right? There's a lot of hateful speech on the signs and crosses hanging from rearview mirrors, and then like these mecha suit people start fighting in front of them, and their truck crashes, and the people in the mecha suits are destroyed by this little baby child, and then the parents adopt the baby child. So it's like it's a Superman origin story, but with these ultra conservative people who believe in this god called Glowcore. And then you
it's forward. That little like left of center sort of difference. Like, okay, I recognize. Nope,
right of center. It's fascism corner, please.
Sorry. You know why? Because I started to say left of the dial, which is a replacement song, so I had to change the words at the last second, which doesn't fit. It's a bad metaphor. So what's really interesting about that is that just like in that first story from Aliens, there's a time jump, so we go for 50 years later, and then the world that we go in is now unrecognizable. Like, so the question is like, whoa, how'd we get from there to here?
Exactly.
And there were those mecha suit guys, so that was something. We don't know what that is. And as far as I can tell, do we know, does the kid show up again?
Unclear to me. I mean, I kept kind of asking myself, like, are any of these characters supposed to be the kid grown? But I don't think so.
No. So we get no clues to sort of how the first part is connected to this, but clearly it is for all sorts of reasons. And I really like that. Because, Remender, not a short story guy. If anything, he's the opposite of a short story guy, as far as I can tell. He's gonna trust his readership to be like, we'll stick around for a while, and so in the case of like the Holy Roller, which I don't love, but for a little while I was like, I don't think I'm gonna read this, and I get to issue 5 and I was like, okay, let's go with it. It rewards sticking around because he's gonna take his time, which, as a storyteller, like if you had a movie and you were sitting in a theater, you don't leave in the first act. But in comics, we have that option, and many, many, many of us take it. The majority do. I think I liked it.
I found the two main characters who are on the cover and then introduced about a third of the way, not even a third of the way, close to halfway through the issue. I found them to be quite annoying. But not so much so that I'm not interested in where the story's going to go. And it seems like, they are two rapscallions who are putting together the pieces to either invade or do some sort of heist on this like angelic mythical god city that I imagine is going to be where we will be reintroduced to the baby that was rescued at the beginning of the issue. So, as a setup issue, and then I read I did read the essay at the end, and it's similarly kind of what we were saying. It's about like the magnificent dear leader that everyone worships as if they were a god on Earth, and like I'm interested in Rick's take on that story.
I think the only thing that kind of like rubbed me not the wrong way, but it's just another take on Superman, and it looks like it's. Right, no, but at least it's referencing it. So far, we don't know yet. But I do know that one of the most common things, and has led to many excellent stories, is the, what if Superman, blah, blah, blah. And
was a Glowcore, that thing we all know about.
And you can tell, right away that the conversation was like, yeah, but if he really landed in Kansas, who would be the people who picked him up? And they're off. You know what I mean? Like it's right there. And I mean, the fact is, like, it starts off as a super obvious premise, and then he does the time jump, and it's like, I don't even know what this is anymore. Yeah. So that's interesting. Sticking with it. Yeah, of course I'm gonna. I don't stick with all of his stuff. I want to say somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of Rick's books.
Right, and I think I've been more in the 50% realm,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm definitely sticking with this one. I'm
Well,
very interested to see where it goes.
let's take a moment and we'll talk about ways you can support the show if you are indeed enjoying what you're hearing. If you are a person who has said, I enjoy the analysis and sort of learning about the craft of comic books that the people who've done this have allowed us to do. It's funny because one of the great joys in my life is my appreciation, my deepening and ever evolving appreciation of the comic book art form and being able to recognize, that and story and everything. And I realize it's sort of being subsidized by this show. And that's kind of it's like going to get a comic book graduate degree, and you guys are helping me, and I'm trying to pay it back as our Connor and Ryan and other guests we have. Anyway, you can go to patreon.com/iFanboy, directly support the show. You can unlock shows for everybody, which has been done. And now I have to do 2 shows a week instead of 1. So that's a thing. You can be part of a great community over on Discord and Facebook. There's a monthly patron hangout. There's now a yearly membership. It gives you 10% off the total price of the whole thing. Apparently, this is a somewhat popular option. So whatever works, I thank you from the bottommost part of my heart, which is too high. I would thank you from the bottom of my feet, which, you know what, let's stick with the heart. There is merch. There's tier exclusive merch. For people, depending on what level you get different stuff. At $5 or higher level, you get on the list to get a patron power, and you will receive a patron power. You'll have access to the Discord server, and at the $10 higher level, you will get an ad-free feed of this show. That's patreon.com/iFanboy. You can go to ifanboy.threadless.com. There is merch, there's t-shirts, there's a whole lot of other things they can put stuff on. You should get phone cases. That's what I think. I think people should get phone cases with our stuff on. You can switch them out, get a bunch. People are like, there you are, Jim, with those weird little designs on there from some podcast you listen to. So that's cool. Go to ifanboy.com/support. And you will see a direct link for PayPal if that's the thing that you would like to do. Always good is the ifanboy.com/Amazon. And that means that if you're going to buy stuff at Amazon, which according to my research, many people do, you can go through there. We will get a piece of that action, costs you nothing. And that's very good too. You'll find links for the Booksplode books and anything else where it sort of makes sense to have it. And then finally, bookshop.org is a wonderful service to help local bookstores find business and aggregate all those so that when you need books, you can be buying them from those kind of businesses, which are super important to our entire culture. You'll find those links where appropriate on the website. Let us return to comics. I was very happy to hear that you picked up Dark Spaces Dungeon, and the 4th issue is out this week.
Sure, yeah. What wouldn't a guy love about a serial killer kidnapping a kid with the same name as his son and threatening to torture him for years on end? Thanks, Josh, for recommending this book.
I love
Dark Spaces Dungeon number 4.
Yeah, I love the dungeon, like the idea of the dungeons.
It's really clever, but it's also depressing. It's
so scary, and I don't like. I mean, it's not new. Like if you listen, it's like I don't like horror, but like that is something that like it's attractive's not the word, but like it's really compelling. I was like, God, that's just horrible.
I think it's the opposite of attraction. It's haunting.
Yeah, it is, which I guess is the point of the thing. And as we sort of get further into this, I am genuinely scared of what we're going to find out.
Well, and the thing that I can't shake is, so it's a U.S. Marshal who was the prisoner of this killer, this lunatic, whatever, for a bit, and he's working with the dad of a kid who's been kidnapped. But I can't help but keep noticing the things the dad has in common with the things about the killer.
The AI thing in this.
Yeah, like, is that a red herring, or are they just trying to set up a way for them to solve an unsolvable case? Obviously we're going to get Dev Patel to star, so who do we get to direct? And I have no problem with them drawing the Marshall character to look like Dev Patel. I think Dev Patel's a great actor, but it's a little funny.
Yeah, I'm very much like I'm anxious about this because there's a kid, and he's in danger, and I mean, in the best way. Like, it's a scary book. And it is, I've said this before. I think that Scott Snyder has really managed to apply a much more minimalist technique. And I think that it really works because he's an excellent writer. But he's writing novels for a while, and now I think he's writing comic books. And I don't know if that's dismissive or something, but I've really just enjoyed all the stuff from Dark Spaces that he's done so far has been really interesting. Hey, I got to thank you for introducing me to Blue Books long ago. It was not a book that I was looking at. You explained it was the story of Christ. I don't remember there.
Betty and Barney Hill.
Betty and Barney. There you go. And I went back. I read all that. I really enjoyed it. And I think it's awesome that James Tynion has this kind of range that he's like, I'm going to do this kind of book, which is kind of a historic record.
It's almost documentary style.
Almost documentary. That's exactly it. And it's funny, when I picked this up, I did not realize it was the same book until like I was reading and I go, oh, it's this book. Of course, it's called Blue Books. That makes sense. And this is about the flying saucer phenomenon. I assume it's all true stuff. I haven't run it through the fact check, well, true enough. It's, you know what I mean? Like these are the. I assume that these are based on the testimony of people.
It's based on what people said happened. I mean, that's to me,
right.
To me, the original sin of the whole flying saucer thing. And for those who don't know, my background is in science. I partially got into science because I was obsessed with things like UFOs and Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster, because I thought if these things are out there, as a scientist, I would love to find them. And then as I learned more about science, I realized like most of that probably wasn't true, but that's okay because it still represents something interesting, right? And so the thing to me that's super interesting about Kenneth Arnold's story and what it led to in the popular consciousness is Kenneth Arnold was a pilot flying in Washington State, and he saw these things that he did not describe as saucer shaped. He described them as like sort of crescent or boomerang shaped, but he said that the way that they flew was they kind of undulated as if it was a saucer skipping across a pond, like when you're skipping stones. And newspapers misinterpreted that into the term flying saucers, which led to people then reporting saucer-shaped objects in the sky, which to me says, oh, this is more about humans and the way we tell stories and the way our culture progresses mythologically than it is about a real phenomenon, because you wouldn't, because then people start seeing saucer-shaped objects. They don't start seeing them until the newspapers misreport what was seen by Kenneth Arnold. So to me, that's fascinating. And this is sort of following. There's a book by Gray Barker in 1956 that I did read back in the day. It's been a long time, called They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. And it's essentially the origin of the Men in Black mythology. So I think we're sort of in this miniseries within the Blue Book series. And Blue Book refers to the Air Force's investigation of all the unidentified flying objects from the Cold War era, because they might have been Russians. That was the concern. More concerned about that than them being aliens, I'm sure. So Gray Barker was the guy who first sort of introduced the concept of the Men in Black. And that was always really interesting to me, because even though the maybe the earliest origins of Men in Black occurred out west in Washington and Oregon and Idaho, a lot of the Men in Black stuff happened in West Virginia, where I grew up. So that's always been really interesting to me. And so this is a really, and then Michael A. Van Oving on art is always a delight. So to me, this has been a fascinating series to see James Tynion IV's interpretation, or at least the way he wants to retell and sort of recount these events in comic book form. And it's all stuff that I'm personally skeptical of, but still fascinated by and think is really interesting and a really interesting part of the American story in the post-World War II, Cold War era.
So the thing that I think is interesting about it is that like the witnesses are very earnest. Like I don't get the sense that, not most of them, in fact, they even like we think these people, it's a scam, but for most of them, like they believe what they saw, and not in a weird like lunatic way, not like Woody Harrelson in 2012, but they buy it, and so that to me is really interesting. I would say, okay, I don't believe in pretty much anything. I don't believe in ghosts. I think whatever, but I do leave the door open for like, I don't know, something we don't even understand could be happening. It
right.
maybe
Matthew,
isn't this
Matthew
thing or
McConaughey
whatever.
could be in your bookshelf. That's the ghost.
He could. Just the math that was done there is just, that's the most unbelievable part of that. Changing all of that stuff to binary, it just doesn't. Anyway, I love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
It's a great movie.
I could watch Interstellar over and over, and
let's
I have.
Put it on right now. Rest of the show.
I am watching it right now. No, but like I have people in my family who believe in ghosts. You know what I mean? And like, they're not crazy people. I know them. Right. But they've had experiences that they believe, and that to me is a really interesting thing. Like,
and
just that exists.
And then people point out the consistency of the sightings and the reliability of the witnesses, and I'm like, okay, well that means that we're seeing something. I don't think this is all made up from whole cloth, but Occam's razor, the simplest, barring any extenuating circumstances, the simplest explanation is also the most likely one. This is a time when our military and many militaries who were antagonistic to us were testing a bunch of stuff that wasn't public. What's more likely that what we now know, the military used to string together weather balloons into a sequence of nine-ish or so balloons and have them running tests along, the mountain ranges of Western states, and you see 9 objects in the sky that are behaving in a way you don't quite know. And this issue even pointed out that everyone always estimates how far away these things are, how fast they're moving. But really, if you don't have actual sight finders or laser ranges or things like that, if you don't know how far away something is from you with a fixed reference point, it's really hard to know how big it is. It's really hard to know how fast it's moving. It's really hard to have that sense of scale and perspective.
And he put that in there.
He did.
He said that.
Right.
Tinian.
And so I almost I would love for you to have him on a Talksplode, because not even to grill him, just to be like, I would love to know, what is your perspective on are you trying to faithfully recount the events? Are you pushing, do you believe something that is maybe a little bit outside the mainstream, and this is your way to try to get that story out there, which I'm completely sympathetic to. I would not be critical of that. To me, it's an interesting comic book exercise that I haven't really seen before. And I'm really enjoying reading his retelling of these events, as skeptical as I am of them. What else is really interesting about all this is this issue ends with the reveal of Roswell, right? So the Roswell crash. Roswell crash happened before Kenneth Arnold's sighting.
Hey now.
So it's, in comic book terms, Roswell becoming a major event in the UFO lore of American history is a retcon it's a comic book thing, right? It's a retcon of what that story was. So I'm excited to see what James Tynion Forth does with it. And then they have these little true weird stories at the end of it. And this one was The Monkey Man of Delhi. We just mentioned Dev Patel in the previous segment. Dev Patel's upcoming directorial debut is him playing a character called the Monkey Man. I don't know if it's the same character, but that to me was...
I just saw that and I was like, why is that familiar? And that's it.
There you go.
Real quick, Black Widow and Hawkeye #1. We said very nice things about a 5-pager that Stephanie Phillips did before. And this is Black Widow and Hawkeye, as it says. 2 characters. I was like, yeah, I have no idea what they're doing or where they are. This was a very well told and executed story. However, apparently Natasha now has a symbiote in her from after when all that Venom stuff happened. That's a big fat no. Yeah. And Hawkeye is the self-serious Ronin Hawkeye, and that's also a no. So I might read the next one. I was kind of like, oh, Stephanie Phillips is doing a Hawkeye book. Cool. I haven't seen Hawkeye in a little while, and I was like, oh, I don't like any of the, she didn't make up any of these elements, but they are what they are, and. And
I also really liked the art in the little 4-page backup, but I did not like this. I did not like the story in the little 4-page backup. But just let's make sure that ever since Clint has been in the circus and Natasha has been wearing the black wig and the fishnets, that they've had a relationship. I'm like, I don't need that.
No, you didn't need to. It's just whenever they showed it, I was just like, oh, they developed some sort of affinity for each other when they were Avengers. Great, that's enough. That's all I need to know. It's great. Yeah, that was rough. It's rough. It's real rough.
All right. Well, to take a stroll over to the Go-Go Power Gazebo, it's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers: The Return, Chapter 2, written by Amy Jo Johnson and Matt Hudson. I only bring that up because, Josh, I'm sure you know Amy Jo Johnson, the original Pink Ranger. Um, so so this story, I will be brief, I promise. Just give me a little bit of runway here, Josh. I'm gonna take this plane off and we're gonna all sail away together. Um, um, the first issue of this sort of is set about 20 years after the events of the original Power Rangers series. So unlike the main series that's happening with Boom Studios, this is sort of taking the original series and ending it where it ended on the show, and then starting it back up 20 years later. All the characters are now adults. They're dealing with the fallout of the final battle between the Rangers and Rita and Zed. The Pink Ranger was forced to kill Rita Repulsa by shooting her in the back with an arrow to save Tommy the Green Ranger. We find out that they were married before the final events of the book take place, and there's something about her.
Nobody knows the trouble I seen.
It's good,
Nobody
man.
Nobody knows
some good Power Ranger stuff. So
nobody knows.
Trini,
that was the song that every 80s movie person would sing if they were in jail. That was like a whole thing.
Well, I think the thing about this that I think is interesting, and this will be the last thing I say about it, is that two of the Rangers in this series are dead, Trini and Jason, and that actually represents the two actors who are also dead. And so the fact that it's Amy Jo Johnson writing about people who are presumably her friends or at least her co-stars, and sort of grappling with what this world of the Power Rangers means without them, I actually think there's a there. There's a little bit of emotional resonance, and that's kind of cool. So I will be sticking with this series. I'm enjoying it, and if people have been enjoying the main Power Rangers book, this is not in that same timeline, but I still think it's quite good. The end.
Those are the books we wanted to talk about. Mostly we. And every week, the patrons get to vote on what book it is that we talk about. And so they did that. And this week, the patron pick is Helen of Wyndhorn, #1, from Tom King and Bilquis Evely, who were on that amazing Supergirl book that is now going to be a movie that I loved so much. And this is out of Dark Horse, and a whole different kind of story. Kinda. It shares a lot of elements of the other book I found. Let's summarize it. A young woman has been living on the road with her father, who is a pulp writer of some, and it's the 30s. It's like the book starts in 1935, and the father has died, and so
the book starts in like the 80s or 90s.
Right, it's a flashback. It's like Titanic, and her governess is telling the story of what happened, and we go back in time, and then we watch, and we find out that the young woman, her father has died, and she was very close with her dad, and they were sort of living a wild life. She's already drinking and partying and smoking and kind of uncontrollable, and then we find out that her grandfather, her father's father, was an extremely rich person. He lives in a house called Wyndhorn, with a Y, Wyndhorn, because everything about this is just a little overblown. And he's hired the governess and summoned them to come live with him. And then I don't know if it's hijinks that ensue.
Well, there's a monster in the woods, and then her grandfather is like Doctor Strange meets Conan.
Yeah, like John Carter of Mars, or yeah, something like that.
And I think the thematic element that this story shares with the Supergirl story is it's about a young, pretty woman who just wants to get drunk. She just wants to have a drink.
Yeah, that's true. I was actually just thinking about, like, even the lettering. The lettering was kind of the same. I also thought
this had some Lock and Key vibes.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like the big old house that's full, a house of mystery, if you will, to pull from another storied comic book legacy title.
Yeah.
There's a room full of books, there's a room full of swords, there's a room full of wine. The heroine takes advantage of the wine first and foremost, and I imagine we'll eventually learn to take advantage of the other rooms as well. I thought this was really strong. I thought this was a really good first issue. It was meaty. A lot happened. A lot of ground was covered. A lot of things were set in place, set in motion, and there was sort of a interesting reveal at the end. And yeah, I was compelled by this.
I remember reading it and thinking about the sort of components of it and thinking, I don't really like I don't like the fact that there's like a monster outside and the house is creepy. But at the end of it, I think I was like, I think it was really good. And I did. I really enjoyed it. I liked that, Tom King is out there doing other stuff. Like, he's known for doing the one thing, like he's going to take a DC character and he's going to do 12 issues with them or whatever. And then this is just, creating stuff whole cloth, not just sort of working with those other ththings. And while it is a familiar story, it doesn't seem like a retread of any kind. Like, it's got elements that are sort of classic and understood and whatever, but it's a thing I haven't, it was good. I love Everly's art. I think it's incredible. Excellent. It is excellent for this story. Fits perfectly. Yeah. I mean, I a little way I don't know what to say, because I don't know what's coming. I don't know what's next.
Would you trade the Wyndhorn's kitchen for your own home kitchen?
I would trade pretty much. Well, then again, I don't know what their voltage is like.
I imagine it's all wood burning.
Yeah, you know what? No, then no.
I've cooked on a wood burning stove before. It's quite fun once you get it going, but it's a process.
Right. Well, that's the part. I don't believe I had an extra 2 to 4 hours to sort of build, stoke a fire, and cut down woods. But it was all right. I recommend, especially if you liked the Supergirl book, or if anything that we just said, it's worth your time, of course, because one thing is it's Tom really leaning into the sort of dialogue of the sort of uptight governess lady.
Right, but I mean, even in the final page, there's an interesting moment where the governess has been complaining about all of Helen's bad habits, but in the final page, she pulls a cigarette out of a packet and starts to smoke it, which is something she complained about Helen doing back in the day. So, like, that's like, oh, so there's something else. Obviously, there's something else going on, but like, oh, there's a little more here. There's a little meat on the bone. Like, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, no, but I think that, those are the things. Everything is going to have more dimension than it seemed like at first. All right, so ratings. Go ahead, you rate.
I was thinking about it, actually, before we even started recording, because I might be all the way to a 4.5 on this.
I'm going to go 4. It's still very early. I thought it was a good setup. I am not blown away in that excited way. You know what I mean? But I'm down, and I'm going to stick with it.
I'm also sticking with it.
Stuck. So there it is. Patrons who give at the $5 or higher level are entitled to have a patron power, which is a totally made up thing that we bestow upon them. And you are up to give away Christopher Duran's secret ability.
Wait, it's made up? I thought.
Well, I mean, if you can prove it real, then that's fine too.
Let me get old Chrissy Nolan on the phone here and see what we can cook up. Okay. Christopher Duran has the uncanny, amazing, not at all dumb ability to take any object he throws, and it can have the power of a boomerang. It will return to him.
Anything.
It doesn't morph in shape, but it takes on the aerodynamic properties of a boomerang for the time it is thrown by Chris until it returns to Chris.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So like he could pick up a brick, right, and just throw a brick, and it's gonna and come right back. And assuming he wants to try to catch a brick that's flying at that speed with his hand, he can. My understanding is that even Aboriginal peoples don't typically try to catch the boomerang. You just let it fall near you, and it saves you some time running after it. But yeah, any object that he can throw.
That's just a convenience thing.
Right. But it has to be, he can't throw a car and have the car come back to him because he can't physically throw a car. So it has to be an object that he can throw. But any object that can be thrown can take on the properties of a boomerang and circle back around to him. And once he either catches it or it hits the ground near him, it loses that property until the next time he throws it. But that's he can imbue boomeranginess on all things.
Well, all right then.
Really useful for like a TV remote, right?
Yeah, but if again, we don't know that he's going to catch it. So, you could, the remote's fragile. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so like, what's the best use of this power? Like,
why would you have to throw a remote though? What would start? I get it. You want to, but it's not like he's got telekinesis and can suck it back to his hand. That's not a thing.
You're just trying to get your kid to do something other than watch Bluey, and so you want them to think the remote is no longer nearby.
Oh man, I don't know about Bluey, but I know people who have talked about Bluey.
Bluey's actually great.
That's what they said. Like I was with a group of men, and like they couldn't get over how great it was. Which is fine. Let's see. Do you want to? It's up to you. You want to do one more? You want to do a mail? Is there a mail? There's a mail.
There are two mails. I would like you to pick.
I haven't read them though.
And excuse my misspelling of Cleveland. Well, we can, if I need to cut the time that you spend reading, I can do so.
Let's hear from Cory from Cleveland. Cory of Cleveland. Of the Cleveland Corys. Do you think that if the big two were to ever stop putting out the dozens of variant covers per issue each month, all the artists who almost exclusively only do covers, Russell Dowderman, Scotty Young, Jim Chung, etc., I could think of many more, and clearly make a nice living doing so, would be forced back to drawing monthly comics?
Listen, capitalism isn't going to pay for itself. Spend your...
Over there, pencil monkey. It bums me out that so many great artists don't do interiors anymore and only work on covers. I have been thinking about this question for 3 weeks and 2 days. I appreciate the brevity and the specificity of that amount of time. Do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you know more about this than I do, so I'll preface with that. But my understanding is that if you are an artist at that level and you lost the cover money, in terms of continuing to have a revenue stream, commissions, art auctions, and frankly, like just storyboarding for Hollywood films are better bets than going back to doing the interiors of comic books.
I would say there are many, many ways for a well-known and talented artist to make a living that don't necessarily involve the
sequential panels.
Yeah. Listen, I share your regret, I guess, of not getting to see these masters of the form, these wonderful artists, work on the part of comics that is what comics is. And like sequential art is the stuff of comic books, using a page that has panels to show storytelling happen in a series of still pictures and be able to impart a sense of motion, a sense of action, be able to tell you what is going on, tell you how people feel, keep a story moving. It sucks. However, the other side of it is that I think people need to look at comics artists, sequential artists, like drawing pages, especially like a monthly book, as a lot more like being a pro athlete than you would think. It is arduous.
Takes a toll.
It does take a toll, and it's like you've never read an article that said you should sit at a desk bent over more often, maybe for 10 years straight every day. It's a really hard job physically. Mm-hmm. So also not even just physically, like it's a demanding mental task, and it's not necessarily the only way that somebody can apply their art in a valid way. So, if I'm thinking about Adam Hughes, who hasn't really done many interiors forever, maybe that's not his favorite part of it. Maybe that's not Frank Cho's favorite part of it. He likes to do pinups, and that lends itself to covers. And then at the same time, you can make a hell of a living doing that and still, have a life and still be able to, do well for yourself. And I can't begrudge anybody that.
No. I mean, it's interesting that comics has created a marketplace where when you reach the top of your game, you price yourself out of doing the medium anymore. And you enter a tier where your time and earnings are better spent doing something adjacent but not quite the medium itself. Like that's all. I wonder if that's somewhat of a unique problem in comics. Like I can't think of a novelist who like became such a great novelist that like, well, now they can only do screenplays because
all they do is I'm sure what you just said is a thing that happens. I mean,
maybe, but
actually Richard Price, a lot of the staff from The Wire sort of went into that, and maybe they still write books.
I don't know. I guess I don't have the intimate understanding of any other industry as well.
Right.
You know, like watch your toes, Josh, because I'm about to drop some names. So when I was at Bill Willingham's house, pick of the week, author of Fables, I was hanging. Adam Hughes was in town, and we were all hanging out. And like Adam Hughes is a guy who loves stories. Like he's not a guy who just wants. I believe he's not a guy who just wants to draw single images because he doesn't like telling stories. I think he does like telling stories, but if the money can be made, if a single comics page takes an entire day for even a relatively like quick artist to do, and a cover takes 3 or 4 days but makes 5 or 6 times the money, like yeah, you would obviously make that transition. And Josh, you and I are people who talk at least with each other about like some of the ways in which the way our brains work, be it attention deficit or whatever. I can't imagine spending an entire day on a single page. I'd lose my mind.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be built for it. And some people have the talent and have ended up in a way it was the thing they wanted to do. You do it for 10 or 15 years and maybe like, well, I covered that. I'm doing something else. I think, it's all right. It's easy for us to look at it and think, oh man, they're wasting their talent. They're, whatever it is, but it's just, there's different ways to apply it. And it really is all about like, you don't get into art to please other people. You do the thing, you're trying to follow your muse or whatever. And I mean, your ratio wasn't off there, by the way. Cover, let's say $2,000. Page, depending on who you are, $300, maybe $500 if you're huge. I mean, like add that up. It's easier to, I'm not going to say it's easier, but it's probably less time consuming to draw a single big panel than a bunch of small ones where you are worrying and thinking about the mechanics and how it works and if it reads correctly and left to right and so on and so forth. Like there's a lot to it. I think a really good example of this is here comes a name. You'd mentioned Scotty Young in there, and Scotty Young is actually pretty unique in this way, is that he did stop doing sequentials for the most part. I haven't seen him do them in quite a while. And I don't know if, he's got kids. His son's about the same age as mine. It kind of coincided with his family that he stopped doing interiors. But no shortage of art coming out of that guy in terms of the covers that he's doing. And then creating many comic book series. Like he never stopped creating. He just stopped creating in that one way. In many ways, he's almost like he's more creative here because, he's not has to draw each page. He's thinking the thing up and writing it and finding wonderful artists, to do his stuff that are perfect for it. Like he's living the life, he made it work that way. And that's what people do. Like it's up to them. It's totally a bummer, but I was, people age on of it. Some guys can't keep up. I think of,
well, can't keep up, or the production schedule of the monthly comic, because we've seen people transition to like, I'm going to do graphic novels. I'm going to do things that aren't on that production schedule.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When I say can't, I don't necessarily just mean physically. Like, there's all sorts of reasons why you just, not gonna, can't, whatever. I think of Mitch Gerrits a lot because if you follow Mitch's Instagram, he does interiors and sequential arts. He doesn't do a monthly book so much anymore. Like that's like if you're lucky enough to get to a thing where you get to stop and have time and work on your thing and your page rate makes sense to that. But he puts up a picture of himself at the chiropractor every week. I mean, it takes a toll. It is arduous, and you can do whatever you want. You'll see guys, they have the thing on their wrist, the brace, and
for the carpal tunnel.
Jamie McKelvey had problems with carpal tunnel and his drawing hand and RSI. It's a hard life.
Is that repetitive stress injury? Honestly asking, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
repetitive stress injury. I can't use a mouse anymore. That's true, by the way. I cannot use a regular mouse. I killed it. All sorts of reasons, that can happen, and it sucks. but I don't think anyone's getting forced to go back. There's too many options, especially if you're somebody, if you made your bones. But like Gabriel Hardman, he can do storyboards for movies. He gets to do that. It's a much less sort of time intensive thing, or at least it isn't every day. That's why Jack Kirby's a legend.
But I also think of we talked about Christopher Nolan earlier. Like Christopher Nolan has sort of developed this interesting model of like one for me, one for them. Like I'll do a big studio movie, or at least before he was enough of an auteur that he could just do whatever he wanted. He would do like, I'm going to do a Batman movie, then I'm going to do Interstellar. I'll do a Batman movie, then I'm going to do Inception. Mm-hmm. And that clearly was able to fuel his commercial work while he was invested in it and cared about it. Gave him enough cachet, gave him enough runway, gave him enough freedom to also pursue the stories he wanted to tell. And I think comics might be, because of the way they're produced, it might be just a little bit too much of a grind for that model to ever take hold, unless you're already so established and great that you can get away with it. Or take
and some people can
10 years to produce something.
But you will not see, there's more examples of folks reaching a certain echelon and then they go, okay, I get to do my stuff now. Nobody, I mean, John Romita Jr. maybe is an exception to that rule, or Mark Bagley or something. They go, oh, I can work on my thing. I can take my time with it. I can live a life. I can do a normal thing. There's just so much more involved to it than like, well, he's got to draw that. Why doesn't he draw this? And I'm not bitching at you, Corey. I think it's
it's actually I think it's a really interesting question. To the final thing I want to say about this, to circle back on a point you made about like what the amount of content, that did you watch Bo Burnham's Inside, Josh?
No.
The special he made during the pandemic. He has this song he sings called like "Look, I made you some content," which you and I are guilty of in this moment.
Yes.
In terms of the content production, a writer is always going to be able to outpace the artist because, and I think this is Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch during Authority. The example is the script page said the fleets collide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's this mammoth 2-page peak Brian Hitch artistry example of these two massive armies in a full-out battle. And it's Warren Ellis wrote 3 words to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like there's always going to be that discrepancy. And so there's still this kind of push and pull of like, how do you acknowledge the artist as the storyteller at the same caliber, at the same level as the writer? And as long as there's a discrepancy there, it's no shock that writers or that artists will tend to transition towards wanting to write more as their time becomes more precious and their storytelling skills get better and they have other stories they want to tell that they don't physically have the time to put pen to paper to make happen.
Or maybe they just get into fishing. That is enough of that question. You make me go on, and I enjoy the conversation. I think this is far too long.
I make you go on. I think
no.
Cory.
I mean, like we have conversations when we talk. It tends to go longer. That's probably a good thing in real life.
I'm editing it. It's okay.
In broadcasting,
I'll get it.
So let's talk about if you would like to write in as Cory did, you can send an email to contact@ifanboy.com. If you want to address it to our Media Explode show, you can write, this is crazy, Media Explode in the subject line. It's pretty obvious, I guess. This past week you will have seen or heard the Media Explode that came out. We talk about the Oscars. Ron talks about music festivals. I help him a little bit. And the What Should We Watch Next challenge, which is kind of interesting, is that we all went through shows that we sort of have on the to watch list. And I don't know if you've heard me say, there's too many goddamn TV shows. And so the others voted and they said they gave us our assignments for what shows we watch. And then we will watch at least 2 episodes before the next Media Explode, and we'll check in. So that was fun. Week after that, the week after, not this week coming up, the one after, Talksplode. It happened. It's real. I spoke with Rob Williams, he of Judge Dredd for 20 years of Dread and Dread related stuff at the same time as a bunch of sort of mainstream American comics and the wonderful Petrolhead and some really other great series that we've read over the years. Absolutely loved. Talked with Rob for a while, a lovely Welsh chap. And I can't wait to I can't wait to share that with you. In 2 weeks there will be a Booksplode. Well, week after that, I might be wrong. Maybe the Talksplode is this week. I think it is. Anyway, and then after that's the Booksplode. We were talking about Homicide Book 1, possibly 2, as adapted by Felipe Squarzoni, based on the novel by David Simon. So tune in for that when it is time.
You can find our library of over 1,300 shows and counting over at iFanboy.com or wherever podcasts are sold. Follow us at iFanboy Comics on Instagram to find out the pick of the week, what that pick of the week is before the show comes out, and sometimes for the best of the week in panels. You can follow us individually. C.S. Kilpatrick on Instagram, our brother in arms, not with us today. You didn't report on where he is, Josh? Is he on assignment, or do we just not know?
There were men, and they came to the house. They were in black, but they were like Hawaiian shirts with a sort of black theme.
Oh, interesting.
And I shouldn't even be talking about this, but they said he's not going to be on the show, and that's enough for you to know.
He saw something he shouldn't have seen.
They looked at me with purpose.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So there we go.
Let's hope he returns from whatever site he's being held at soon. But until then, you can see what J.A. Flanagan. You can see what at J.A. Flanagan is up to on Instagram, and I am at Ryan Haupt on Instagram. For folks who have been asking, and I appreciate the questions, we are recording a fresh episode of Science Sort of tomorrow, and I don't know exactly when it'll drop in your feed because our production cycle is a little slower than this here show, but we are working on it.
You can subscribe to youtube.com/ifanboy. You'll find all of our old video shows. We post this show every week. It's just audio with a still, so it's not video of us doing it because I don't want to deal with lighting on a weekly basis. That's basically where I'm getting, or to fix my face, because I wear makeup. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I just don't, because I wouldn't want to deal with it. It's just too much. And that's why there's not a video show. You could consider writing a review, leaving a star rating, leaving a like button, all those things that you can do to content that you like. Just called it content. Without irony, I called it content. What do you want? It's the world we live in. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible. There's podcasts on Audible. There's podcasts all over the place, many places, wherever you listen to them. By the way, you mentioned wherever podcasts are sold. If you find someone selling our podcast, let us know, because that is not okay. That's all.
Black market podcasts.
Yeah. It's a terrible business model. I got to pay for this. I can get it free literally everywhere.
Thanks for listening.
Here's the money.
I'm Ryan. I got just a little bit of concealer on, and and just to,
we did do some makeup. I don't think we kept it up, but in the early days of the podcast, we did.
Yeah, I mean, I used to act in shows a lot growing up, and so I've worn makeup plenty of times. It's it's just it's a part of that process. Nothing to be ashamed of.
It's uncomfortable.
I'm still Ryan, whether I'm wearing makeup or not. I'm Ryan.
Yeah, it's true. You just show up on camera slightly
Your
less
line
shiny.
After I say I'm Ryan is
I'm Josh.
There we go. We got you there.